Alright, so we are back working on the truck once again. Out here in front of me I have our engine, transmission, and the engine crane. The goal that we are going to be doing for this particular video is to get the engine and trans mounted back up, get it on the engine hoist, and get it mounted into the truck. We need to figure out if we need to do any trimming possibly on this cross member to make sure that the transmission will fit, as well as figure out what we need to do in order to build a transmission mount. We also have the rear ready to put the rear diff back in. So the nice thing is once we get the engine and trans figured out and the rear diff in, we can figure out what we need to do with the drive shaft. I'm pretty sure that we're gonna have to lengthen it, partly just because this chassis is longer than a Miata chassis. However, as far as how the engine sits forward, I'm not 100% sure. So we're gonna have to figure that out. So stay tuned. Okay, so we got the engine back off of the engine stand and back on the hoist. And as you can see, we got the transmission bolted back up onto it. Now the trick is going to be to maneuver it over, place it in, and see what kind of interference we're going to get with that first cross section on the truck frame. So we're going to get working on that. Alright, so we got the engine back in the frame, sitting obviously with the engine mounts bolted up, and obviously how it's looking right now, it looks nice and level, but if you look towards the back of the truck, you'll notice that it's actually sloping down. We figured as much. Obviously, like I said, fully expect that we'll have to notch this section of the frame and rebuild it and build a mount. Nice thing is the mounts for where the original brackets were for the power plant frame for the Miata line up pretty close, so we should be able to build a mount off of there fairly easily. This says 3.9, 4.0.
What do you think?
Alright, so we need to drop it at least 2 degrees. Other thing that we might have to take into consideration is how it is lining up with the back. It may actually have to tip down a little bit more depending, because we're going to want to get the trans and the diff as lined up as straight as possible. So it's that time again to get some cutting done. We're going to cut this cross frame here, just a section of this out to drop the transmission down. I'm also going to work on removing this piece. This was part of the old 2-piece drive shaft. This was the mounting location for it. Obviously we don't have that anymore using the Miata stuff, and right now it's in the way, so it's gonna go. we got the frame notched out where we needed to in order to get the transmission to drop down. We're going to be taking this 1/4-inch plate and having it as the support, basically sitting like so. We're gonna eventually box into this plate once we get everything sorted out. Basically, I went through and I marked a couple places where the bolts are going to be going through for these rubber mounts. The back of the transmission is going to sit on this just so that obviously we want to reduce the amount of vibrations going into the body of the vehicle. It's going to vibrate a lot without these. So we're going to mark these, drill these, and work on getting this mocked up so that we have close to our final placement for the transmission. Now I finally have an opportunity to use this drill press I bought like a year ago for metal fabrication, and it's finally time. Ta-da! So we got the rear differential sitting out here. I also stuck the drive shaft into the back of the transmission just to start to get an idea. So today we're going to work on getting this mounted into the back and start figuring out what we need to do in order to get the transmission lined up with the drive shaft to the rear diff, whatever trimming that we might need to do. But first, obviously, we need to get this in, so that's what we're going to work on. We're going to get the jack in the back, jack it up, and get it thrown in there.
What are we doing?
All right, so I got the diff in place, jacked it up, and then I have these mounts that hold the diff on from the bottom. So I'm just tightening on the nuts for these right now, so that way I can remove the jack and then we could start figuring out the angle that we need for the transmission, and then start figuring out how long we need the drive shaft. So we got the rear diff in. We tried pulling out the axles as well. These axles are actually for an NB. This diff is actually from an NA. They're not the same. As you might be able to see, these have a spline on this end, but the splines are actually part of the NA ones. So they have a flat end that mounts on there. Unfortunately, we weren't successful because it requires a ton of torque, so we'll have to figure that out at some point.
Fire around all this flammable shit.
Yep. It's a controlled burn. Alright, so we tried pretty much anything we could, added heat to it, added a ton of leverage. These things just don't want to come off. It seems like they're pretty seized on. So we're going to resort to actually just cutting the nuts off. I looked online. They're not too expensive, so it's going to be a little bit just a time saver to do it that way. And also, we're not going to risk hurting ourselves with the tool breaking or something like that. So that's going to be our solution. was able to finally get this axle off. It just required me to turn the axle nut into about half an axle nut. Yeah, this thing was pretty much completely rusted on. You know, whoever did this, if it was done at any point, didn't use any thread release. So always make sure to do that, because these wheel bearings go bad at times and stuff like that, and if you can't get it off, well, you're gonna be in a pain in the ass situation like us. Alright, after a bunch of struggling, got the other axle in. Obviously still need a nut for this side, but we got it bolted up onto the diff, which is nice. Hopefully we're gonna try a little bit different tactic next time to get the other one off. Since we have an air compressor, I'm gonna try hitting it with air impact, see if maybe we can get it off that way, since this one gave us such a struggle. And gonna order a couple of new nuts for these axles as well. But besides getting that on, all we have to do left is obviously get the longer drive shaft, and we should be good to go. Alright, so I wasn't too happy last time with the results of the cutting. It took way longer than I expected, and I did a little bit more damage than I would have liked to. Everything should be fine functionality wise, but I'm trying to keep stuff, you know, as good as possible. So this time we're trying a different tactic. First up, got a heat gun to try and expand the nut. Also have some WD-40 to try and break it loose. And we went and picked up a nice heavy duty pneumatic impact that hopefully should be able to have no problem taking this off. So we're gonna try this tactic and see how far we can get. Why does it have no torque? That was way too easy. Well, right tools for the job. Alright, so now we got both rear axles in place. The only thing left on this is getting the nuts. Unfortunately, the nuts I ordered are for the NB axles, which turn out are not the same size as the ones for the early NA ones. These are 1.6 axles, so just keep that in mind. I believe they're supposed to be 29 millimeter. The ones for the NB ones are 32 millimeter. So if you're planning to do something like this, just be aware of that. The last piece of the puzzle, obviously, for the drivetrain that you can see is missing is the drive shaft. I had dropped it off in order to get an estimate on how much it would cost to get lengthened. The shop basically said that at this point that drive shaft was basically shot, so they wanted to build a completely new one, and right now it's just outside of budget that I want to be spending on this. So for now, we're just going to keep moving forward and start working on getting the cab back on and start getting the suspension figured out. So that's going to be the next video. And for everybody who's watching, I want to say thank you. I know that our videos don't come out in that quick of succession. Big reason being that we both have normal jobs and families and things like that that obviously take up a lot of our times, and this is more or less a hobby. But you know, we're still trying to figure out extra time to dedicate to this project and other projects, and we've steadily been seeing our subscribers go up as well. So we want to thank every one of you who has joined us so far, an extra special thank you. And if you would like to, you know, help us out somehow, let us know if you would be interested in merchandise or a Patreon or something like that that might help support us. But until then, obviously, if you're not yet, subscribe please, give this video a like, and we'll see you next time. The CB3 Fabrication Hardtops for the ND generation Miata are now available. If you are interested in ordering a hardtop, go to CB3Fabrication.com. Our friends over at Blackbird Fabworx have recently released their GT3 style roll bar for the ND generation Miata. The CB3 Fabrication Hardtop was designed in conjunction with Blackbird Fabworx to make sure it fit the GT3 bar with no modifications. To celebrate, we are offering a 10% discount to anyone who orders a CB3 Fabrication Hardtop and a GT3 roll bar. And if you would be interested in learning how to drive on a racetrack, Tract offers driving clinics as well as providing several sessions for more experienced drivers. Go to tract.llc to learn more.